go with the superdelegates question first. Let's bring in the questions that
let's get to
some of our subscribers had, because our subscribers are hitting on something that is accurate and correct.
All right, so we actually had 2 superdelegate questions. The first one was from Guy Citron. Says, what's the best way to discredit the faith in superdelegates before it's too late?
And what's the second one? I think the second one was the DNC.
Can you speak on the DNC? This is from Jared Watson. He said, can you speak on the DNC being public enemy number 1 when it comes to voter suppression by using superdelegates?
So it's not just superdelegates. If you remember in 2016, the DNC did a few things. They were trying to suppress the vote, realizing that if there was going to be an influx of people hitting the polls, those people probably were voting Sanders. He was expanding the electorate. So they ended up shutting down polling locations to make polling lines longer, making it that much more difficult for people to vote. And look, it does seem like they were monkeying around with the results. I mean, the results in Iowa in 2020 gives some context of what might have taken place in 2016. And if it took place in 2020 and likely took place in 2016 because you would have had no way to know because you wasn't able to check the math in 2016, it must have happened elsewhere also, especially if you can get away with that nonsense. So personally, it's the shutting down the polling locations. It was the DNC essentially working, colluding with the Clinton campaign, with the messaging and everything else. And yeah, superdelegates. Because what they did was, look, human beings have this weird quirk about us that when it looks like somebody is the leader, people tend to lump in with the front runner. I don't know why they do that. They just do that. This is almost one of those reality things where your judgment of reality to some degree is based on what other people also say that is reality. If you understand me, it's not necessarily entirely based on your own perceptions. There are tests that show this, that if you have multiple people say and pick the wrong answer, that the person who even knows the right answer will be inclined to pick the wrong answer to go along with the group. So having superdelegates and that number being up there like it was insurmountable made it look like Sanders didn't stand a chance. And they did it over and over and over again. Entirely, that election. Superdelegates didn't vote until after the election. The fix was already in, though. Hillary Clinton moving money around, meaning money that was supposed to be given to the state parties, moving it around and taking it for her own campaign. I mean, all of this stuff was utterly atrocious in the way that they were behaving in 2016. And if this is the exact same party that said we can cheat a candidate and pick a candidate in a smoke-filled room if we wanted, there's nothing you could do to stop us. It's the same party. Bill Clinton picking Tom Perez. Obama pushing Tom Perez in the race. Bill Clinton going to Tom Perez telling him, don't let Sanders take the party. Sanders, in this race, to me, by himself. All of these people on stage. Listen to this. This is iconic.
We are less than 2 weeks away. We're going to have enough.
All of these people on stage.
On this.
Chuck Todd, the most oblivious man on the planet, is asked an actual really good question, basically about a brokered convention. Should the person with the most delegates get the nomination?
The person with the most delegates at the end of this primary season be the nominee, even if they are short of a majority. Senator Sanders, I'm going to let you go last here because I know your view on this.
The Democratic Party they should be, which I believe they do.
I'm trying to do
so
this,
that
yes or no,
everybody else,
fast.
everybody can.
So you want the convention to work its will?
Yes.
Senator Warren.
But a convention working its will means that people have the delegates that are pledged to them, and they keep those delegates until you come to the convention. All of the people.
All righty. Vice President Biden?
Play by the rules.
Yes or no? Leading person with the delegates, should they be the nominee or not?
No, let the process work its way out.
Mayor Buttigieg?
Not necessarily, not to lose.
Senator Klobuchar?
Let the process work.
Senator Sanders?
Well, the process includes 500 superdelegates on the second ballot. So I think that the will of the people should put down, yes.
Thank you, guys.
Most votes should become.
Every last candidate on that stage effectively said, no, we don't want the will of the people. The people choose. We don't want that. We're willing to we got to go through the process. Meaning, a vote for any of these candidates is effectively a vote for superdelegates, Clintonites, lobbyists, to effectively steal the election from the person that actually won it. You have one guy on that stage saying, I believe in democracy. Everybody else. And this is the exact same party that has been screaming
No, but
for 3 years.
You're screaming.
This party has been screaming for 3 years, Hillary Clinton won by 3 million votes. Hillary Clinton won by 3 million votes. All of those votes.
They wanted the votes then.
All of those votes were in California. She got stumped in the rest of the nation. It's bleeding red. In fact, California gave so many more votes to make it that 3 million. I mean, she got whooped. And they never shut up about the Electoral College for 3 years. They wouldn't shut up about it. But now,
unanimous.
Elizabeth Warren, the person with the most votes, should win the race.
Could you stop doing that?
But now, none of these people who screamed about the Electoral College cares about the notion and the will of the public. Elizabeth Warren came in fourth twice. A distant fourth twice. Below Buttigieg. And she's still hanging out in this race as if she's some consensus candidate that they're going to sweep in. She can't even win her own state. And no, she doesn't have black support. She doesn't have liberal support at this point. She doesn't have the support of the youth. She has the support of the wine crowd that Pete typically gets. So this notion that she's hanging in this race and she's going to be the consensus is nonsense. This party is literally arguing, and one of her surrogates argued, that winning is effectively a technicality and that the party could come together and choose a candidate. This is utterly fucking amazing logic. They may potentially use superdelegates to rip this away from Sanders. Now, if Sanders takes South Carolina, I don't think this shit will matter. He's going to have critical mass as he's going in. They can cheat him, don't misunderstand me, in the various states. Yeah, but the ball of steam he would have in South Carolina is not a state that Sanders is supposed to win. But if he wins it, it would demonstrate and get across that A, he has a broad coalition of support among all of the demographics, among all of the races. Yes, the older demographic, not so much, but everybody else, yes. And the notion, the very fucking notion, that a person with that much support, with that broad tent, with that amount of people, with that ability to not alienate all of these groups to focus on issues of class and the things that are their material interests, that they are willing to use lobbyists and Clintonites to rip it away from that person. That would be the end of the Democratic Party. Mark my fucking words. That would be the end of the Democratic Party. There is no situation where that number of people will be backing that guy going into the convention. You rip it away from him, and those people are going to sit back and be okay with that. Yeah. None! I am telling you from personal experience. The people who are backing Sanders are not backing him in a cerebral way. This is not the same backing where it's like, yeah, I think Joe Biden can win it. It's not that. It's something that goes much, much deeper than that. There was a reason that Sanders supporters were so angry and bitter after that last race. The things that he espoused are things they've never heard before because for the most part, the media and the political class, bought by the oligarchs in this particular country, kept that stuff off the ballot. Meaning those aren't the things that they discuss or talk about. It's not talked about in media. What are they talking about in the media today? Cuba. They think Cuba is the issue to talk about. All of these people sleeping on the streets. Cuba, all of these homeless encampments. But the issue is Cuba. People barely making ends meet. People being burdened down with medical debt. If Sanders wasn't running in this way, none of that stuff would be on the talking, the docket to be talked. Yeah. So you've had a media class and a political class that's been able to keep economic issues that affect mainstream people off the table. And for the first time, somebody is espousing that stuff. And the things that he's espousing is an empathetic, compassionate, collective politics of us working in unison where your interest is tethered to my interest, because guess what? It is. And espousing that, not hiding the ball, not being dodgy with it, espousing that, not in this flowery rhetoric, but through issues of policy that directly and materially affect all of us. It is a compelling vision, and it is a compelling vision that many of these people have, and many of these people believe almost as a religious tenet of sorts. It's ideological in the way that it presents itself. And for the first time in 40, 50 years, you have a viable candidate pushing that particular position. If you cheat that guy, if you rip that away from that guy, if they even believe you cheated that guy, you would lose them, and you will lose them for a generation. Even if the party doesn't end, you will lose those people for a generation. Think of how the African-American vote goes and votes for the Democrat. 90% of blacks vote for any random fucking milquetoast mushy Democrat. Why? Because ultimately, you had a Republican Party that scared the shit out of all those African Americans, where they wed themselves for a generation to the Democratic Party en masse. Imagine the same thing happening where you have a revulsion to the Democratic Party by that demographic that was going for Sanders at 60%, 41 and below. What does it look like when all of those people immediately drain from your party, even if they don't vote Republican? They're just not voting for you. That means you lose in perpetuity. Just understand what's at stake. It is true that if Sanders takes it, yes, the Democratic Party is going to be remade in the image of Sanders. But guess what? The Democratic Party is not owned by third-way Democrats. Let's be very clear about that. The Democratic Party as a political vehicle is only there to represent the interests of the public. And the interests of the public and the ideals of the public can change. And as such, the party can either change or die. This goes back to my original argument that the party needs to either be burned to the ground if the party cannot be transformed into something that is a vehicle for public sentiment and public will in regards to economic issues.
I have some questions on this.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Tim Flowbug says, as Bernie runs away with it, will corporate or establishment Dems do a UK Lib Dem split from the party?
No.
What do you think about that?
No. I mean, look, you're going to get corporate Democrats that are going to try to shaft him, try to injure him. They're going to do attacks on him. Some of this stuff is going to be under the cover. Some of this stuff is going to be a certain degree of subterfuge where they throw him modestly under the bus. But I don't think they'll split. Splitting is different. The problem is that the overwhelming majority of the people who are in the Democratic Party agree with Sanders. Like, how are you splitting away from something when your base, the very people who back you, fundamentally agree with him? When they ask, who does your values more align with? Well, it goes to Sanders. Who do you agree with on healthcare? Sanders. What about environment? Sanders. Down the line, they've been aching for somebody to talk just like this particular guy. And so the notion that these corporate class Democrats are going to split, you may have some at the top that split. I mean, the Democratic Party has become so much of a corporate class that these people who are just Republicans that aren't racist found a home in the party. The catch is, there should be more to being a Democrat than just not being racist. And for the longest time, they've used this notion of identity as a way to dodge issues of economics. Those people may leave. The elites that are in the party may leave. Fuck them. Let them go.
I got one more on the Super-delegate. And this is actually from last week. I noted this, so I made sure I did not miss it. But Guy Citron, I don't know if it's Citron or Citron because there's no accent, but he called into the show last week, and you guys weren't able to get to his question.
Oh, what was his
So
question?
he put it there, and I said, I'm going to bring it up today. And so it's right on topic. But he's saying, when is LeftTube going to start deep diving into the Super-delegate problem? We're talking about it now, but he says, who are these people? How are they picked? How do they have to vote in the second runoff if there is a brokered convention?
So,
if we're going to support the narrative that the will of the people should determine the nominee, who these superdelegates are and what they stand for could be a very powerful part of it.
all right. So think of it this way. Last time around, the superdelegates effectively got to vote for whoever they wanted. So Bernie Sanders would take Vermont, but Hillary Clinton will still get like an even level of delegates from it because the superdelegates would just vote for Hillary Clinton. She had sewn up those superdelegates before the race had ever really taken place. So it was a foregone conclusion that she was going to get those votes. This time around, a deal was made that instead of getting rid of the superdelegates, they were going to put them on the first round. So the first round, they are chained, providing the person could get a majority, 51%, meaning get a majority over everyone else in the race. Now, here's the catch. I, on this channel, at the time that was taking place, I could replay the video, I said, they're still there. And I argued that there is nothing to stop. I made two arguments. There was nothing to stop them from flooding the election with enough candidates to force it into a second round, meaning just because you've never had a second round before doesn't necessarily mean that you won't force the second round depending upon who's running. We know that the Democratic Party was having Stop Sanders meetings. This was published in the New York Times. We know that Buttigieg, Klobuchar, Schumer, all of these people were involved in the Stop Sanders meetings in addition to lobbyists and some of these other people. We know that the Democratic Party does pick people to run in various contests. We also know that there was a pretty big fervor into trying to stop Sanders, meaning all of these things for the most part dovetail with functionally, whether these guys are functioning independently or not, but ultimately functioning with this notion of trying to stop Sanders. And superdelegates, especially now, with the race being the way it is, with Nate Silver predicting 69% chance for Sanders to effectively win the plurality of the delegates, it's not even close. For them to use superdelegates in the second round, like I said, superdelegates still exist. They could force it to a second round, and when it goes to that second round, they try to steal it. These people are Clintonites, these people are lobbyists, these people are just creatures of the party itself. You may have a few that are for Sanders, but more likely than not, think about what you know of the Democratic Party. Think about what you know of MSNBC and the people who are pronouncing on MSNBC. Think about all of these creatures of the Democratic Party and the things that they have been saying. MSNBC is their mouthpiece. That's a good idea on what the establishment of the Democratic Party thinks. What is MSNBC like towards Sanders? And do you honestly believe that the superdelegates are going to be any different? That's the rub. Why on earth would you have unelected people selecting who the choice is over the will of the population? Meaning if Sanders takes this on the plurality, technically, based on the Democratic Party's rules and the way that they allow the process to be legally rigged, they can steal it from Sanders with those superdelegates. This is why I was so against Sanders saying he'd back whoever won it, because they could steal it from you. I just showed the clip where every last Democrat on that stage said yes. And again, warns people, making the argument that just because you won on with the numbers, well, that's just a technicality. That for the most part, you can be a consensus candidate. Like, this is dramatically problematic. And again, I flagged this the moment this was taking place. All of these lefty channels were out there celebrating, yes, we accomplished this great objective. And I was like, you didn't even cut the number of superdelegates. You just moved into the second round. They haven't gone anywhere. You honestly believe that look, if they were going to not be used, they would have just gotten rid of them. Right? I mean, what's the use of having superdelegates if you're not going to use them? No, they're there for a reason. They're there to use them when you need them, where you can flood the terminal in order to get enough people to try to force it into a second round, which is what they're trying to do with Sanders. A bunch of unelectable, unaccountable people who they just chose, creatures of the Democratic Party. If you, as Donna Brazile, want to make your case, then you are well known in your station. Your voice is big enough to make that case. You don't necessarily need the votes of 10,000 people. Also, if you use superdelegates in order to rip it away from another person, you will lose that race. But again, for lefties, the problem is they know that. They know that. They don't care. The issue here is stopping Sanders because they understand that Sanders would reshape and fundamentally shift the tenor of the Democratic Party. Losing to Trump, if they can stop him, would allow them to maintain their power base. I mean, that's basically it. I mean, the question becomes, how far are they willing to push that? If Sanders takes it where he has twice as many delegates as anybody else, and they do that, that's not just losing in the next election, that's losing for a generation. Mark my words, I could be wrong. I've been right on all of the stuff for this election. So, mark my words on this very specific point. One of the questions